Good afternoon, everybody. How are y'all doing today? Yeah, thank you. We got a really cool crowd today. I can tell we have a lot of naturalists in the crowd. Thank you so much for coming out to our Naturalist Academic Symposium here at Operation Life Underground. For those of you who are new, welcome to Super Cheap Gallery. We've been putting on very cool art shows for 10 years in Los Angeles now. Can you all hear me okay, by the way? Okay. Yes? Okay, great. Today we're joined by a wonderful panel of naturalists, artists, anthropologists, authors, and enthusiasts of the urban environment, nature, and the artwork found within it. Moving from right to left, we're joined by Skrederstu, who is an artist, a co-author of the wonderful book, The Ulysses Guide to the Los Angeles River, which details the biology, artwork, history, and environment of the Los Angeles River. And we're joined by Contrabando,
Hey, so yeah, Contrabando is a project that William and I started with the goal to stimulate interest in the natural world within our community. And we do that through various ways, one of which is the artwork that we titled, we kind of phrased it, we called it eco-culture propaganda. So in those we tell ecological and cultural stories. We also host the plant shows and the plant sales. And then whenever I say that, people are like, what the hell is a plant show? But I guess think of the format of like dog shows where there's different categories of breeds. So apply that to like cacti and succulents. Because William and I are we're the president and vice president of the Long Beach Cactus Club. And there we host monthly meetings. We have guest speakers once a month. And we're trying to also host events outside of the club because that format kind of gets a little heady sometimes. Not heady per se, but there's no social aspect in the sense of people hanging out and talking. So what we want to do is flip the format of having a social event with an educational aspect. And so the first one that's going to happen is next week, and the theme is agave. So we're going to have mezcal and tequila tasting. We're going to have food that incorporates the plant. And we're also going to have a guest speaker that is going to talk about agave beyond mezcal and just paying homage to the plant that provides so much for the ecosystems that it's part of. But yeah, anyway, a little winded now. So yeah, that's what we do.
Thank you. We're joined by
Hi, I'm William. I'm a horticulturist by day, a herpetologist by night, and one half of
Hi, my name is Raul Diaz, a child of Baldwin Park in the San Gabriel Valley, where I found a little salamander when I was 10 years old, and that fueled me to pursue my career in academia, where I'm a herpetologist and embryologist studying the critters that come out at night, but I also study their embryonic development to understand why they look the way that they do.
I'm Susan Phillips, and I'm just so happy to be in this company of wonderful people. I have been doing stuff around graffiti for a while, maybe since 1990. Right now I direct an environmental center. So I feel like this show is kind of the culmination of so many things, and I really appreciate being here.
Hello, my name is Chaz Bojorquez. I'm a graffiti writer since 1969. So I'm going to bring the graffiti aspect, the art aspect, but also my experience down in the LA River. I grew up in Highland Park, along the Roach River. So that's why I encountered graffiti. That's where I practiced my skills. That's where I learned about my culture. All down in the riverbed, down into the tunnels. So we'll be talking about that today. Thank you for all for coming.
Hello, I'm Sean Roach, and that is my real last name. You're going to learn all about me in a little bit, so I'll keep you in suspense. And back over to our first speaker officially. Back to you, bud.
And what am I supposed to do?
Okay. Well, Chaz, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you here. And Susan, it's an honor to have you here. It's wonderful to have all of you guys together on this panel. I'm excited to discuss a variety of topics with you. I would like to start out by just discussing, maybe starting with you, Chaz. Can you tell us about your first experiences in the Los Angeles River and the ecology of the Los Angeles River?
It wasn't so much about the Los Angeles River. At the confluence between the Arroyo Seco and the Los Angeles River, it's supposed to be very magical. It's a magical place. I've heard these old timers talk about it's an Indian spiritual location. So that corner, that whole area right there has always had tradition. And in there, if you look up into the bridges, you'll start seeing some of the very first graffiti in Los Angeles. There's one underneath the, I believe it's the Spring Street, which is a killer. Yeah. If you look underneath there, there's a killer done in a kind of a Helvetica, but it's got quote marks, kind of like a little Cholo style, all done in black and it's done with tar. This was the time when the Los Angeles River wasn't dug out. It was all natural. At that time, the old timers would tell me, they go, yeah, salmon used to come up to Los Angeles River. And also late at night, they could hear the horns, I guess horns, and the bells of the ships down at the harbor. It would come up all up the river in the valley. Those are probably in the 30s and the 1940s. So now that the river's been dug out, you need binoculars to look up and you'll find killer way up there. And who showed me those was Susan. Susan, one day, her and I went down there and she wanted to show me, go down and investigate the river. Find the earliest forms of graffiti, tagging, signs of identification where people left their mark there to be recognized, to be remembered. And a lot of that was hobo, before the graffiti movement or before the Cholo from the 1940s on. So we found, looking sideways with the sun just right, you can see little bumps in the concrete. Even though it's covered up with paint and dirt and bushes, there's still these raised letters, and you can see all done with the tar and all that. So that was some of the very first graffiti, and plus there was that one wall, a bunch of hobos had started drawing on there, and from the 1940s, I believe.
1914.
1914. 14, that's a joke with my wife, 14. And in 1914, they used to start drawing, leave their names there. So we have a long history of that confluence between the river, between the Arroyo Seco and the Los Angeles River. I lived up the Arroyo Seco, halfway up. I was born in Chinatown, and then we moved up there to Avenue 60 when I was about 2 or 1, something like that. And then so I always thought of myself as a Latino, because my grandparents are from Tijuana, but we only spoke English. So Highland Park, growing up in there, it was kind of like, people would leave us alone. We were kind of like invisible, So we would go down to the river, and in the street tunnels, the drainage tunnels that would come off the streets, they would end up there in the Arroyo Seco River. That's where we discovered everything. Actually, I discovered my career there. I would go up in the river. There would be the tubes were probably about 5 feet high, something like that. And you walk up in there about a kilometer or so, about a mile or so up in there. And then it would just be a little stream of water, all green. And as kids, we were about 10 years old. We used to wear 2 pairs of Levi's. and then take our candles and heat them up on the ends, and then stick them onto the sides of the tubes. And at the end of the tube, way back there, would be a slope, and you had to walk up backwards, holding the top. You get up to the top of the slope. Then you would take a starting run and go sliding down the slide. And then in the total darkness, you'd be spinning around because it would be all full of moss and slime and all that. And we thought it was the greatest thing. It would stink like moss and water and like these guys over here, these raccoons. We were raccoons. But the river was magical because once you were in the tunnels, there was no sound, no city, no people. You were private. It was personal. It was really a lot of fun. And then there I encountered some of the graffiti, the smoke graffiti they used to use before the brush, and in those days, before the spray can, they used to use the brush, but also as Zippo lighters. Your lighter, they used to fill them full of kerosene, was what you used to buy. And kerosene makes a lot of smoke. So there used to be all these letters from the 1940s, 1950s, and all that. Around the 1960s, they started changing to cholo, more script. They were more teenager, more surly, moving around. And then probably around the 70s, cholo, alverga, shoulder to shoulder, all capital letters, all black, monsters, all that. There's roll call. That's where my influence comes from. But it was the river. We would go down there and we would find our fantasy land and all that. You want me to go on? There's more.
Thank you. That's fascinating. I had a question. When did the two of you link up for the first time and explore the river together?
I remember we met at maybe after a self-help graphics show or something. I remember going to this, what was the restaurant called? El Paria, the one in Boyle Heights. Anyway, I can't remember. La Paria, yeah. So we went there for dinner and I felt like I was meeting my hero. So it was really a wonderful, it was wonderful. Sometimes I've felt like a full-on fangirl with stuff. Like the first time I met Adzi, I was like, could barely speak. My favorite bomber, I was just like, this is a real person. But I felt like that with Chaz, and I can't remember how long it was before we started going out together, but we did start to go out together with a small group of folks, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. I've also slid down that same slide he's talking about, but just kind of accidental-like. So, but it was really, really fun. I mean, I think the thing about the tunnels is they really do transport you to another world, and it's a world that's underneath the city. And what does that have to do with our lives and like getting through the lives that are that we're all part of, and that sometimes cause us to be stuck in a certain way of thinking. And the tunnels just they just take you out of that space in such a wonderful way, and they connect you to people in a new way. So with Chaz and Tommy Marin and Ben Higa and I, we formed this little team to go out, and then later, with other folks, there's just a lot of really interesting, really old writing in the city of Los Angeles, and it is its own kind of mini vocation. So it's just been a wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I think it was in the 90s, and then we really started going at it in around the year, sort of late 90s, early 2000s. So yeah, it was fun.
Chaz, how many different art pieces would you say you've done in the LA River or Arroyo Seco or any of the channels in Los Angeles over the years?
Well, that's a trick question, because in this exhibit, there's 100. In those times, it wasn't necessary to do a lot. If you did 5 hits, you were the king of the city, in those times, and all that. So I probably hit about maybe 15 skulls across the Arroyo Seco River, across the freeway. I didn't do. I knew about New York, doing all city or all state. They would go everywhere. But in my mentality, it was all about being in your own community. It was about the gang. You go to the limits of your neighborhood, and that's where you hit up. So I only would stay in Highland Park. the spiral staircase right out of the 5 freeway when you come in downtown. You hit the spiral staircase, that's where I hit it in 1969 and stayed up till 84, the
Yeah.
Olympics.
Yeah.
It stayed up that long, one of the longest tags and all that stuff. So so I probably did about 15 of the skulls there, maybe about another 4 or 5 in Hollywood because I was working in Hollywood, and then just about another 10 on different places, different cities or something like that, but not that many, you know that. But that skull made my career, you know. I also tagged a lot. We were talking about that. I also tagged a lot, yeah.
And your fine art practice as well. When did you get started with your fine art practice?
I was always into fine art. I went to Chenard Art Institute in 67, 69 and all that. And then I went to University of Guadalajara, took in ceramics, sculpture, pre-Columbian art, dug our own clay, made our own kilns, fired our own clay body and all that. I had long hair, I was a hippie. Ceramics was my master, was my curriculum in college and all that. Never graduated, you know that. But recently I was given a doctorate from Art Center for my work in the streets.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
that's, But I've been painting since then. And painting is my strength. We got 2.
I think my next question for the two of you is, can you talk a little bit about how you feel the significance of doing artwork in the tunnels? In your opinion, what is the significance of you know, the hot issue of the occasion today, which is artwork in the tunnels under Los Angeles? Sorry.
No, these 2 mics,
Just use those two?
is it because they're next to each other?
I don't know.
I opened up another one.
Okay. Yeah.
We're good.
What is the significance of art? To be an artist, you're a special person, okay? Like I always tell my wife, you need a lot of attention, you need to be cared for, all that. You're like a poodle, you need to be walked, fed, all that kind of stuff, because you're always in your head. To be an artist, it's the one person that you could kind of like think about memories, feelings, past, present, and future. You think about isolation. You think about girlfriends or boyfriends and all that kind of stuff. You think about all those things in life and abstraction and everything else, and you could bring it. It takes an artist to bring it into one piece of paper, to organize all those feelings and make a visual statement out of it. You know, you tell yourself, well, what would that look like? And all that. You know, so that's what I tell myself. So art is your identity, is your voice, it's your spirit animal, you know. So art is in some ways for me, my art is more than who I am. If I didn't have an art, I would just be another person in the city. If my art is created who I am, and all that. And right now, art becomes the teacher. You take a painting so far, but then after a while, the painting tells you what to do. The painting tells you, this is the subject matter, keep the focus on there, this is the chorus, put the colors, push it back, all that kind of stuff. We need, if I had to move up the subject matter 1/4 inch and I write out a canvas, I will add another 1/4 inch of the canvas to remove the whole thing. That's what it takes to be an artist, totally committed from morning to night. That's what I see with Ugler. Ugler, when I met them, I think you guys were just teenagers. They were just 20, 21 years old or something like that. I was in my 40s, and, you know, at that time. I'm 75 now. You know, I'm the oldest graffiti writer in the world right now that I've met. You know, and I'm still a big young buck, right? It just, graffiti drives me the same way that drives these artists. Painting in the river, in that quiet space, in that special, you know, surrounding. Each one of these guys who've been down in the river knows that it's a very special. It's unique. It becomes your own, it's like you're in your living room, and that's where you can paint. Art speaks for these young men. And also, I appreciate good work. In my mind, art is about head, heart, and hand. Good idea, good presentation, but I want to see skill. And that's what Chris and Evan has always impressed me. That's why I admire these guys for the last 30 years.
Even right behind you, the work that they did for this show is super impressive, the scenic painting. What do you think of the exhibition? Is it first time seeing it today?
All these other guys.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, yeah, for sure. Would you mind, Susan, telling us your views on the significance of the artwork in the tunnels and a little bit about your experience in writing your book, The City Beneath, A Century of Los Angeles Graffiti?
Sure. The significance of writing is, I think, and art is what Chaz is getting at. Doing it in the tunnels is a little bit of a different thing, because I think in the early days, it's really a byproduct of exploration rather than something that people are pursuing to make pieces. Like that's just not a thing. What's a thing is going to explore as a kid, finding stuff on the ground and having that serendipitous moment of finding things and I'm talking about the early part of the century. From then up until now, you're either carving with a knife, maybe you're writing with a pencil, you've got a piece of chalk maybe in your pocket, maybe that's planning ahead. You've got a rock on a wall. Like that's what it was. And I think for me, the most beautiful thing about it really is it reminds me always of Muhammad Ali's shortest poem, which is me, we. And like that's the beauty of graffiti in the city. That's the beauty of graffiti underneath the city. The other thing about it underneath the city, and I mean, I think all over the river is this tie to place that Chaz is talking about, and how you really you develop a relationship with the infrastructure of the city that's very different than quote unquote normal people have, right? Like, graffiti writers and skaters just see the city in a totally different way. That is extended yet again in the tunnels. It's like this really weird kind of nether space, and you guys are all used to it now, but I think anyway, the other thing I think about it that's important is it becomes this sort of accidental chronicler of the city, so that there's this accidental curation that happens, an accidental curation of history that happens because these are hard to access places. And so you wind up with these random signatures. No one would ever curate a history of LA in that way, completely lacking in intention. And that's the story that I tried to tell in The City Beneath, just following where it led. And that turned out to be, I thought I knew a lot about LA before I started really working on that book in earnest, but no. And I learned so much from the tunnels. So those are, I guess, the highlights for me. It's totally different now because people are in pursuit of those as spaces that, get them out of the eye of the police. It's sort of like the secret club on crack. There's just like all this stuff and information that passes about where and when, and like all this show is a product of that. And that's really exciting. I would say this is definitely the first and probably largest intentional not this, but I love this. But the work of Operation Under is the single largest intentional art piece in underground LA, which I think is really exciting and a real moment for the city.
Let's see. Can I get your perspectives there?
I think there's going to be a lot of overlap with everyone up here. I kind of find myself in the middle. I think I went into a wash drain when I was 3 with adults, but maybe that imprinted on me. I got a little older, I was like 10, and we would spend days in drains skating and getting a lighter and trying to go through. And yeah, like it catches everyone who gets involved in Operation Under. Like, it got my interest in smaller amounts, being younger, but this round in my 30s, going into my 40s, some people invited me, and I kind of thought like, did this when I was a kid. I think been there, done that, and that wasn't the case. It pretty much was all these things I was looking at. An escape from the world, a place with bare concrete, like you can see view of the show. I used to be a ceiling painter, and if you're good at your job, people don't know you're doing your job. So, you know, if you haven't been here, this is a whitewashed gallery most of the time. So this team of scenic painters that are all members of Operation Under brought the wood back to wood, made these columns look like rust. Like, it looks natural now, but when you see the before and after, it's really something. So it's this weird back and forth of trying to recreate concrete versus an endless sea of concrete. And half the time when we start painting, it takes so long to get there, and we're tired, and people got wetter than they thought, and you just kind of want to get started. And it's later on, after that I paint an image or whatever, that I realize, oh man, there's this layer of spider web, and then oxidation, calcium. Like, you could almost pick any spot and it would be a great background. Personally, I don't like the background of layers of old graffiti, because I'm after the concrete. And that's led me down the road of studying infrastructure, talking to people like Susan Phillips, and trying to understand, like, this isn't a natural cave that we stumbled upon. It's built for a reason. And I don't know if we talked about that yet. Like, maybe this is kind of the bridge of these gentlemen, and maybe that guy too. But, you know, before channelization, most of the LA River, these washes that still have names of creeks, like Hampton Creek, they were actual creeks. And the Army Corps engineers built off of them because the grade was already there. It was just an easy one to channelize it. So if it could all be done again, I would rather see it natural. But since it's here, I try to understand it as much as I can and try and imagine what it looked like 100 years ago or 500 years ago. And sure, it was a much different place, but back to modern day, there's nothing to absorb all this water. You know, it rains in mid-Wilshire. Like, there's a couple lawns, but more or less it's all just concrete. It goes down the drain that you see, and then it ends up in bigger storm drains. And eventually it either goes to Bologna Creek, LA River, or the Rio Hondo, and out to the ocean. So it's fun to play around in storm drains, but people die every year.
Yeah.
Because they're made to fill up quick. Like, that's the function of it. That's why Army Corps engineers built it, because I think the LA River was channelized in 37. Leading up to that, there were all kinds of horrible floods for some of the same reasons. So, like the Australian group, Cave Clan, they've been doing the drain exploration since the early 80s. They say, if it rains, no drains.
If it rains, no drains.
So that is one thing the Operation Under guys don't mess around with. Like, if there's a chance of rain, because you don't have reception down there, if it's been raining, it's not a great way to die. Like, and it's easily avoidable. But yeah, I mean, I can go off in all kinds of directions with all of this, but we have these guys here.
Yeah. You guys want to speak to this a little bit?
A lot of what I'm going to say is speculation, where they actually have answers.
put that mic back down.
I just wanted to add about the channeling. There are portions of the river, the concrete channel, that do have, you'll see like large pockets of vegetation. And there's 3 of them. There's one in the San Fernando Valley at the Sepulveda Basin. There's the Glendale Narrows near Atwater. And then there's the Long Beach estuaries. And the reason that those are there is because when the Army Corps of Engineers were pouring the concrete, that water was just so hydrated that it didn't let the concrete dry. So that's why you have those pockets. And it also, I guess, it just spurs the idea, or just stimulates the idea of, like, hey, what if we take out concrete from different places? And then let that ground, let all that, let that channel, let the rainwater that we have go down to the name of the term escapes me. The aquifers, yeah, just go back down and fill the aquifers. But yeah, it's one quote that I guess that I want to share is, this quote was in reference to desert life but it was they see wealth where others see poverty. So that can, I guess that kind of encapsulates like the LA River to me, right? Like people can just see it and like think it's just like a trash drain gutter, but there's so much life going on there. There's so much life, and the closer and closer you get to it, we brought like a little turtle tank with water ferns, and then you just see little insects floating around. I'm gonna dump it back in the river because I feel bad. But take a look at it at the table. It's really, really cool. Just wanted to add that about the Army Corps of Engineers.
So, plant life, yeah, like all this stuff, it's not glaringly obvious, but like most things, as you look closer, it's there. Like me and Sean Roach were in a tunnel recently, and as he was taking water samples up in the foothill area, you know, with his intention to see what it all looks like through a microscope, he glances, and behind me is a giant cobra snake. I've seen a fair share of it. This thing was pretty big. And I'm going to let Sean Roach reveal his mystery, tell the rest of the story.
Pass that mic down, yeah.
Yeah, guess what? I got a picture of that here somewhere. So I just want to start with this image here, which you may be able to see. This is in one of the tunnels. It says S31 SIG ULZ, and then Sean Roach. I was introduced to Operation under the backfield leader. We actually grew up in the same area, and I knew him since childhood. He reached out to me a couple of years ago in regards to Operation Under, as he got wind of my interest and thought that I would be definitely entertained and maybe have something to offer down there, which I hope I've done both. So I don't come from a graffiti background, is my point. When it came to writing these tags, they have these alias names, and then Sean Roach is just in there. So I don't have too much to worry about as far as keeping my identity concealed. I come from a background of working with animals. I had a company called Education Through Nature from 2003 to COVID to 2020. I'm actually re-upping that right now. I worked as an educator, specifically teaching life science programs. I worked with a lot of schools, speaking at different events, as well as working as an animal handler for television and film. I specialize in things that most people want to run away from. Giant cockroaches. I'm under the desk of Eric Andre, if you're familiar with the Eric Andre show, with the tub full of rats that I make shoot out of his desk and scare desk. And with the last name Roach, the tunnels were very soothing for me. So here's a picture of some bats. No surprise there that bats are a frequent guest to the tunnels. Cockroaches. This is an American cockroach. Recently I saw a lot of black widows in there as well. And as far as the art that I brought into it, surprise, I like to paint big bugs. So this is a a pincher hub, people like to say, and it's about maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. I did that on my first mission
You can ask
with
Stu, I'll
Operation
put some
Thunder.
layups for him so he gets a
The
chance.
last one I did is a giant cockroach, painting that there. That came out pretty cool. I want to go back. This is a house centipede. But one of the things that's really intriguing me about the tunnels is the unexpected beauty that we find. And that's because nature is everywhere, and nature merges in interesting ways within the tunnels. Here's an example of light that's coming through a manhole. And what happens is that actually hits a puddle of water in the tunnel and reflects back up onto the darkness. I mean, it's very, very dark, and it creates these beautiful organic shapes that kind of remind me of these cool cone jellies. That's called a caustic reflection. One of the times I went in recently with one of the members, I wanted to exploit these reflections on the pools of water. So I packed up a whole bunch of gear, way more than necessary. There's my shadow there with a huge pack. Must have been about 80 pounds worth of gear, including a big battery. And I started to shine my own lights down onto the water and eventually captured this image in the tunnels, just using 3 lights and the existing water in the tunnel to reflect back up onto S31. I'm fascinated by light. I carry that into my own fine art. Here's an example of some things that I've done, making concentrations of light beams using magnifying lenses and projectors in my house, shooting it into my mouth, really cool, bending it. Here's some stalactites that are formed inside the tunnels. Again, they're just not something you'd expect to see, but in the same breath, you might. Sometimes the calcium, as mentioned, will seep through the walls and start to create these really beautiful formations that remind me of agatites. So I get very distracted by some things that you might not expect. Okay, so this is a cave-dwelling creature. Do I have a second to take a couple out real quick? Yeah, so I actually have some live tunnel-loving creatures that I would like to share with you guys. So inside here, I will take out this cave spider. Oh, goodness gracious. No, you know what? Let's just do some cockroaches really quick. Here, hold this.
Okay, so I could actually talk pretty loud. I come from a very loud family. This is a South American cave roach. There's actually 4,000 different species of cockroaches that have been discovered thus far. Let me see that shit. The cockroaches that we usually see in the tunnel are American cockroaches. Hey. These are South American cave roaches.
Wow.
And Operation Under has extended down to South America. There are paintings that are numbered in Ecuador, I believe. So these are going to be found in other parts of South America. In the tunnels, I'll regularly stop and want to look and examine some of the different things there. Recently, I saw the most big, beautiful black widow you've ever seen. So I do just want to show you another, one more thing here, spider, and then I'm going to let other people talk. And I'm going to put all of the creatures. If you saw over there, there's some displays. They're all naked because I have all of them with me here.
Wow. Oh my God.
So there are certain animals that thrive in places where, it just doesn't seem like there should be anything there. The tunnels are an interesting example of that. The different creatures that you might find there. Tarantulas, probably not, but it's freaking cool to see one. And I thought, why not? I'll bring it here for you guys today. We see orb weavers, big black widows, brown widows. But if you were venturing further south, in the way into the tunnels in South America, you could come across something like this. This is a South American bird-eating tarantula. And I can actually touch the back here and pull the silk out, which is really cool.
Wow.
Going into the tunnels, I play with everything. I've picked up big sheets of spider silk in the tunnels under LA and just put them on my face and played with them. Yeah, so That other creature, here's some other ones I'll put in the containers. And just to kind of conclude, because I could obviously keep talking, this is the gopher snake that Evan was referring to. Exiting the tunnel, this guy was sitting right there. And it must have fallen through the wash. And it's not a good place for a snake because it's just concrete. There's not really dirt, there's not rocks. There's, of course there's rats, but that thing really belongs up and out of the wash. So I picked it up, threw it on my back, carried it a good, I don't know, not too far, maybe a quarter of a mile, and released that. So that's always fun to me, the unexpected things, animals, and natural elements that work their way through in these places. They're very fun to explore, and also really fun to create these time capsules to paint. And to paint some of these things is really awesome. So I'll conclude with that for now, and I'll throw these.
Yeah. Round of applause for Sean Roach, ladies and gentlemen. That was amazing.
Yeah, I've got a scorpion here and some other interesting things, a big African millipede. I'll put that over on the table there when we're done. And I'll put this away so it won't distract us all.
Thank you, Sean Roach. You're welcome. What are the chances a guy named Sean Roach? I think this might be a good bridge to Mr. Raul Diaz, Professor Raul Diaz. In the ones I've been on, we've encountered a fair amount of animals, most of them not too menacing. We always worry about lone mountain lion and that not being good, but these are probably things the good professor can expand our minds on.
Well, hello everyone. I would not deliberately walk into a spider web, but I've had many on my face.
That was so lovely.
So, growing up in Baldwin Park, it's not exactly the biodiversity hotspot that you see on Discovery Channel and Animal Planet, but if you pay attention to the environment, especially during rains, the ground becomes alive. And when I was a kid, I saw what I thought was an earthworm with very tiny legs, and I have a preserved specimen in the back. We have very small salamanders that live underground here, and they'll come out through the cracks from under your flower pots during the times of rain. And they were really interesting because, again, growing up in Baldwin Park, my mom was really overprotective. You know, first generation, she was an immigrant here. She said, there are lots of gangs. You cannot go anywhere. So she let me go to the library. Going to the library, I discovered field guides, read everything I could about reptiles and amphibians, and I got to understand these animals that look like earthworms in a very different way. They don't have any lungs. They depend on dark, cool, wet weather in order to breathe through their skin. So just by the nature of where you find them, inevitably, you're going to find them in areas like this. So that led me down a path of becoming an amphibian biologist who got the opportunity to travel around the world to all these tropical areas. And I went to everywhere that people thought was a scary place that you shouldn't go into at night. And it was really fun because that's where you got to see lots of wildlife. You never knew what you were going to find. It's a little tougher here. I think from watching the news, I'm a little more scared to go into these tunnels at night in East LA or whatnot. But it's a very beautiful place to admire not just the shape of the animals, but their colors and their patterns. And that's really what's led me to an area that I think Evan's been living in for a long time, and that's the boundary between art and biology. And I became really interested in how body plans develop during embryonic development, but part of what I study in the lab is how colors and patterns form in skin, which is kind of overlapping with, I know exactly how those form in my skin because Evan's one of the guys that puts them there. But really looking at this type of a display, you see a lot of creative pieces, but you also see lots of pieces that depict nature as is. And purely because I had to show people what I was looking at through the stereoscope, I had to become trained as a scientific illustrator. And this is before cameras were on everything. You had to actually draw things to show what people needed to see. So it's been beautiful being in such a diverse panel with a diverse audience, and in really an area that encapsulates where we all kind of tiptoe in various disciplines.
Thank you. Any questions in the audience? We've got all these people up here, all these knowledgeable people. Yes.
So as we start getting more, as the political tension in the United States starts rising, and we get a turn of graffiti and artists and kind of looking back to their roots as a way to protest the injustices, which is what graffiti originally started with, at least in Los Angeles and in the other side of the United States of America. Do you think that we'll be returning to these underground roots as a means to create a safety net for those people and those creatures who have been silenced?
Whoops, my shoe. I really love that question. I think one of the things about the tunnels and the underground life and graffiti in general is that it models a compromise. It models compromised nature. It shows us what compromised infrastructure is. It shows us what a partial life is, where there's nothing that's perfect. It shows us models for resilience. It shows us things, finding beauty in unusual places, finding value in places that are undervalued, how to put pieces together in ways that people have not put them together before. I think that there's so much in this scene. Just the mere, like what you were saying about finding water, being able to breathe through your skin. So many things about the way that certain plants grow in the tunnels when there's no light. You know, certain ways that roots come down when you have a tunnel that's not paved actually. Roots will come down and drip water. You know, how does that become the biomimicry that we model our lives after? And I think that we do it hopefully in a way that includes excluded people, that is more just, and that gives voice to people whose voices have not been valued. I see a lot of what I think of as wanting to model lives post-capitalism in graffiti in general, and then on the ruins of, you know, capitalist infrastructure in specific. So thanks for that question. Does anybody else want to?
That was a good one. I mean, it covers a lot of ground.
And as far as like the tunnels being a place for people to express or capture, you know, political things, it's pretty uncommon that I see those things as far in as we go. But you know, there's not too many people that I'm aware of that are doing those sorts of types of writings. But Evan has a good one that you mentioned the other day that was something involving Iran or Iraq.
I mean, a lot of the graffiti in the tunnels is juvenile, and I like to imagine 60 years of kids that are all the same age at the same time. You know, there's one under high school that's just packed with it. And one of the most political ones I've seen, there's a stick figure making love to another stick figure from behind. And the one behind said USA and the one in front said Iran. So that was some 80s political commentary under a high school, probably with weed smoking involved.
But yeah, that's a good question, and it could potentially be a good place to capture those things because it is like a time capsule underground. I just want to go there and not think about politics, so I don't know what.
I mean, it could. There was one that was done in Operation Under that was kind of
over there.
Imagery of COVID.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And funny enough, one of the guys was telling me when they were first talking about coronavirus, he painted a tunnel in Corona and he was like, I'm gonna catch this tag that says coronavirus. Nobody's gonna remember what it was. Turned out differently.
Saying that no matter what you're doing in political regardless, especially if you're taking into consideration the fact that everything still matters, that's especially like a fact way that the top side of the city lives. So even if you're not seeing political graffiti, the fact that you have people going in there, putting in nature and establishing that notion is political something.
Yeah, she was saying basically like, depending on what lens you're looking through, just the act of going under these places, doing these things, it's sort of, you know, it's against the grain. It's, you know, it's a different way of thinking. It's potentially sort of a political act in itself just by the nature of it.
I guess it falls under disobedience. So this is a restricted space, and we have something we want to do in that space, and we're going to do it.
I just want to point out quickly that graffiti wasn't always illicit. Large swaths of human history, it was not. You know, it might have been political, but it wasn't. If you have literacy and you don't have paper, you wind up with a shit ton of graffiti on the walls, in people's houses, all over the place. So there's a whole other kind of thing to talk about with that. I think it's a more complex question.
So there's a lot of talk about restoring the LA River to like a natural space. And so the river runs through very strategically underserved areas of the city. In order for them to, there's the study that I saw, if they want to take the concrete out to provide a green space for people, they would need to expand the channel by 3 times. And then who lives by the river, right? Strategically underserved. So there are, I guess, like theories of like maybe channeling that water and bringing it up to different, to water like a separate, you know, green space along the city. But having green spaces is super important. Like with me, like I grew up going to the LA River to, I'm going to be honest, to get drunk and high. I find myself now going to the creeks and the tributaries to do the exact same thing, right? So, full circle there. Yeah, but just having spaces just for people to interact and just, you know, look at what the natural world is, you know what I mean? Like, I remember it blew my mind, like, realizing that animals had, like, the botanical, the Latin names, right? The genus and species. I was like, that's just a squirrel. It's not like anything else, right? Or like raccoons and stuff. So it's very important to expose kids, and just people in general, not just kids, to like, to natural spaces. It's really important, I guess that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
Do you ever do any work near reservations?
Near reservations? No, I haven't had a chance. Yeah, if you could look me up what's in info, I'll super we do, I have friends that do, it's guerrilla gardening. So you go to like freeway passes that are just like filled with like garbage and shit. And then they plant, they're not native plants, but they're better to look at than concrete and like trash. So you'll see like aloes, like a whole strip of aloes or a whole strip of like agaves and stuff. And there are, just to go down that pathway, there are certain, there's a group, the California Native Plant Society, that they organize groups to weed out non-native plants. And so the non-native plants, what they do is they compete with native plants, right? And one that you see a lot is mustard. So you'll see like these really tall plants with like little yellow flowers. And what mustard does, it has like really deep roots and it'll just absorb all of the water. And the natural and native plants have like shallower roots. But even then, the mustard, what mustard does, it releases a chemical from its roots and it kills mushrooms, mycelium. And then so in the LA River, normally in other places you have earthworms decomposing matter to have like bioavailable nutrients. But in this case, in the LA River, the plants use mushrooms. Mushrooms, mycelium breaks down natural material for them to absorb. So invasive plants, you know, release that chemical with the mushrooms. Now that's another factor, right? But yeah, going back, the California California Native Plant Society, they organize this group and they go weed out. And to think of the scale, it's like, yes, it's like a small pocket, but over time, you know, it just grows and grows and grows and grows because you give those native plants a chance to establish, you know, and then set seed and then, you know, it's really important. So if you get anybody's interested, I guess look into that. But reservations on it. Really interested though.
Any other questions on
I got a question.
Let's let the
Okay.
You briefly mentioned earlier the dangers associated with doing graffiti sometimes with flash flooding and very quick floods that can occur. What were your guys' scariest moments in the tunnels? Did something come to mind in particular?
So, the thing I remember in the first trips, and when people are going on their first trips, sound is amplified down there, and you know, it's all new space. We're like kind of conditioned to know how streets and buildings and what sounds and smells mean what. And I remember the first one specifically, but the first couple times, you will hear this water rushing, doing what it's supposed to do, coming from a side tunnel from above. And it sounds like a wall of water. And I remember me and a friend just thinking like, this is it. Like, get ready, like, we're done. And then you see it and it's like,
Just a little waterfall.
Like, you know, maybe that times 10, but like, nothing. And that happened to us once.
Yes, it did.
I took him to a tunnel and I was like, man, it's usually nothing, but that almost sounds like a vehicle.
Yeah, yeah.
And you kind of just have to be ready for it, and then, like, I've never had it happen to where it's not saying that it can't happen and we aren't there during the rain, but I've never had it happen where we're like, holy shit, this is crazy. When I was in Ecuador, it was a little different. You know, you're at 10,000 feet, it's basically a channelized mountain river, and the currents were stronger. And you know, one thing in LA, our drainage is all drain water. It's runoff and drain. Sewage is completely separate. But on the East Coast, throughout the US, South America, it's a shared system, which means I think it's liquid sewage and then runoff and natural. So you don't see it in the pictures, but the minute you're there, you smell it and you become aware you're sloshing through the waste of a whole city. So there are some pretty gross aspects, but the imagined wall of water never came to me. But good question.
I had something that happened to me because you mentioned a lot of these interesting locations are great habitat for frogs that you can't find because the city's built around it. And we had to crawl into one when we were in Ghana in Africa. And sewage is very different out there because it's everywhere. It's on the street. So you go into these areas where the water collects and there's just thriving frogs everywhere, but you have to get in it in order to collect them. And I remember I reached for a frog and I caught it, but I, in slowest of slow motion, remember a drop of water that flew up in the air and it went into my mouth. And I said, I'm gonna feel that in the next couple of days. And I was sick for about a week.
Oh my God.
So there are dangers from lots of amounts of water to just one drop.
Wow.
Yeah, the water can be fucking nasty, and there could be like a possum that's just disintegrating in it. And at home in the studio space that I have real nice clean water to dump my brushes in. And if you didn't know, most of the work that's being done with Operation Under in particular is done with brushes. Well, I have a strange habit of liking to lick my brushes, put them in my mouth to get them just the right shape. So in the tunnels, you're using that water. That's the water. I'm not going to a faucet. So there have been several occasions where I almost stuck that water in my mouth, but I fortunately caught myself on more than one occasion. Don't do that, Sean. But yeah, there is funkadelic all around you, and I think that's always an impending danger in you.
We all have stories. My most recent one was there's an early system of gravity water tunnels that's from the, sort of late 1800s, say. And they're hand carved out of, the sandstone. And to get into it, you have to like crawl on your stomach like an army man. And I'm like 55 years old, overweight, I'm actually kind of a square, you know what I'm saying? So, but the other thing is that there's like literally, other people have gone in shooting heroin. So there's heroin needles, there's all this like broken glass, and you're like, oh, thank God I'm wearing jeans, you just, anyway, there's some fun things. Yeah, and it's great to look back on in the moment. You're just so in the moment. That's what's really beautiful about it. You have to focus so hard to be in the moment. And I guess if I have a question for you guys, it's, do you ever get used to it? It's like, I don't go in enough to ever get used to the environment of a tunnel. You guys are always in there. Do you ever feel like it's normal? It's, you know what I mean? Like for me, it's just an escape, and it's kind of like what you're talking about, just somewhere you can be completely. But for you, does it become so normal that it's not remarkable anymore?
There's always something remarkable, but a lot of it becomes normal, because I think that's what the human brain does. It gets to know things and takes cues. And there's things we expect, but always expect the unexpected. Because just when you get used to a certain amount of water, a certain kind of smell, it's always different. Like, you don't see a lot of people living underground in the area, and then before you know it, you're in the middle of a 15-person camp, and there's a bonfire going. And like one that's in the vicinity of the tar pits, we're used to, we're riding bikes, and we're getting all the waft of the normal smell, and then we start smelling oil. Or like what I processed as crude oil, and it was the same tar that you see at the tar pits seeping through these 1920s concrete walls. So yeah, just as much as you can. I couldn't imagine living down there for any amount of time. Questions?
Hello, I just want to say, first of all, thank you guys so much for your time. All of your experiences and information is extremely valuable. I guess the question I have is, do you guys have any fears, or I know, especially as like graffiti writers, even like excitements about the potential of what the Olympics is going to do to the city, and what all of that's going to bring. Especially, I remember you saying, your longest tag got taken out by the fucking Olympics. So, things like that. I'm already even seeing on the freeway, they're already starting to buff all these like huge blocks, like blocky, big roller pieces that have been there for like ever. It's really sad, but
It's what the Olympics is going to do. It's going to give us a new dialogue and give us a new identity for the city. And that's what it's going to do. Is for the artwork, I believe, a lot of it is going to get buffed out. But that is the nature of graffiti. Graffiti is supposed to have a life. When it's up, it's alive. But then it does have a time limit. It does have an expiration date. It does, it is going to be covered up. Because it is on property, and property changes hands. Now, the graffiti that was buffed out in the 70s and the 80s and all that wasn't as good as the graffiti now. The graffiti that's going to be buffed out now is going to get better. What happens is the Arroyo Seco River is basically about 5 miles of barren canvas because it's at an angle. You can walk on it. So I could paint day and night. It was great to have that space, but it got buffed out and all that. So, but there's the photographs. There's the history. A lot of my career is based on my history of what I've done, you know, that when I started, you know, that kind of stuff. But we don't need to have those images. It's just kind of like, let's look forward to the next generation of art because it is going to get better. Honestly, every time I go out, my wife drives me around and we see new graffiti on the streets and on the freeways. It blows me away. In the 80s, 90s, I was good. But I was the only one. I was very few graffiti artists at that time. But now everybody is good. Everybody is good when I see out there in the streets. In the parking lot, there's a couple of fabulous colorations, you know, dark tones and all that. A whole bunch of people in the end of the parking lot, these figures and all that with little stars in their eyes and things. Incredible work, imagine it. You know, so yeah, the Olympics is going to be great. You know, I've already been approached. I already have an Olympic poster with my letter A on it and everything else. So that's already going to be coming out. So, but I'm also getting hate mail, you know, saying, you know, that I'm being suppressed by the man, you know, being pushed by the World Committee, all that. But the Olympics bring the world together. This last Olympics was fascinating. The breakdancing was insane, you know, and they're going to be cutting it out, you know. So. And then you have the paraplegics, Olympics, all that. Come on, we all support that too. So I'm very much for the Olympics and all that. We've already had it here, I've already been through it and all that. But yeah, everything's gonna get buffed. Get ready to do more work, you know.
A quick side note to that. I think the biggest thing we learned when making the Ulysses guide is infrastructure along with the city goes in cycles. And whatever cycle's coming next, it's not bad to try and have influence in it, but to some extent, you have to take what the next cycle is.
Other questions over here?
First question.
This is fantastic presentation. I'm wondering, are very, very urban adapted mammals like coyotes, bobcats, feral cats and dogs, do you see them making the tunnels and drains part of their kind of ecological infrastructure as either places to den or hunt or just travel from one place to another and see? We haven't talked much about bigger mammals, and I'm wondering if they're down there, what they're doing, where they are.
Maybe you and me can half and half.
Raccoons, lots of raccoons and raccoon droppings, but yeah, I'll pass this.
So the raccoon is the mascot of Operation Under, and like most things in Operation Under, that came about organically and from experience. The drains are their super highways. Everybody who lives in LA has probably had the experience of seeing one pop out of the gutter, whether they're just peeking out or that's. This morning, I have never seen a raccoon in my area. I've seen bobcats, rabbits, all of it. For some reason, no raccoons. I heard a little rustling outside of my house, and at eye level, this big raccoon was looking at me. So in almost every tunnel, and you don't need to be like skilled in tracking animals, they like to shit in the same place generally. There's dry tracks, wet tracks. That's one of the reasons we like to go in the morning, is because there's less animal activity. And those guys are pretty brave, you know. They will, I don't see them backing down. One thing that some of the guys have taken on is if there's been wildfires and they're thinking of painting in the foothills, they will wait a little while because, you know, in theory, a mountain lion or a bobcat or a bigger mammal could be using that as a temporary shelter. Anything you want to add to this?
So when I think of these drains, I don't simply think about them as a home for the animals, but when you look around Los Angeles and how Shane talked about the drainages for water, there's very little water available for birds and mammals to drink anywhere. And I think about that quite often, in fact, to the point that it always makes me reflect on this really funny video I saw on Instagram where someone gave a cotton candy to a raccoon and it went into a stream because they're not trying to wash it. They are behaviorally wired to rinse and stick their hands in with the food items in a water source. And when it did that, the cotton candy dissolved away and it looked at its hand like, what the hell just happened? So a lot of these organisms end up going into the drainages because, you know, whether it's clean or dirty, it's the only place to get water anywhere in the area. And I think the city, the county, the state really do have to get better about getting non-native plants off the list for what everyone's putting in their household. We're also emphasizing that we should have more bodies of water for our animals to drink.
I just want to add that our infrastructure in terms of the rivers and the tunnels, as well as the animals that live in the city, are all under increasing amounts of climate pressure. And so all of those systems, biological systems and water systems, are all under increased pressure, and they will be under increasing pressure as literally each month passes. So drought and all of these other things, the way we're wasting water by just watering the ocean. So there's lots of different things infrastructurally that we can do that will provide mutual benefit and will actually radically change the way the infrastructure is, hopefully to make it more friendly to all kinds of creatures. The river's too big to do that overnight, so there's going to be still lots of places to play and explore, but it's all going to really come to a head very soon, I think.
And I'm really under the impression that the raccoons know what they're doing as far as, okay guys, let's go into this tunnel and that's going to take us to such and such a place. You know, they have to be, the animal has to be able to get out from where they're going to, you know, from where they are to where they're going. So I think that probably eliminates some frequency of larger animals like coyotes and such. I think if they did explore those, they're going to go like, not really for us, and come back out. By the way, these missions, that all of them that I've been on, and as far as I know, they take place really early in the morning. We meet at like 6 o'clock, 5:30 to like 6:30 typically. And I believe one of the reasons is to potentially avoid some of the more active creatures that are going to be there at night, amongst just kind of keeping cool and incognito or whatever. But, yeah.
I have a small story about the animals. It's when I was a kid in the 50s, when I was about 10 years old, there in Highland Park, we used to have deer come up into the front yard. They would eat the rosebuds, you know, there used to be lots of deer, lots of quail. They would come in seasonally. A whole covey of quail would be coming around, and they were beautiful. But also when we would go down to the riverbed, I lived close by, we would take off our shoes and walk up to the concrete riverbed between around Avenue 16. And there used to be millions and millions of pollywogs. They're not there anymore. And the river was full of frogs. At nighttime, it was a chorus, loud, all that. It was really incredible. But that doesn't exist anymore. But there weren't any coyotes at that time. Now there's coyotes everywhere. I open up our front door, they're standing out there. All of us have coyotes. And also I remember when I was a kid, one time we were close to the Pasadena, to the Suicide Bridge. down below there. We saw a large bird, so we raced and tracked it, you know, and ran it down. And it was a female pheasant. So we caught it, took it home, and we ate it. You know, and my grandparents were from Tijuana. We used to eat rabbits and quails and doves and everything else down there. So it was delicious. But that was the last one that I ever saw down there. There's a lot of animals that we have lost, but there's a lot of there weren't that many raccoons, there weren't that many coyotes, and there weren't that many mountain lions. And then I have friends right here in the mountains. They send me pictures of elk. There's huge elk up here. So there's a lot of animal life, but it's just different now.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience?
I just have a question. I was wondering if anybody have any thoughts on what the effect of the surveillance state, like the rapid growth of the surveillance state might have on like graffiti, and if it's gonna like push people more further into doing more graffiti in the tunnels, like since writers are like, you know, we already can't paint like trains in New York where like we're started, and then now people like even like CSX lines, you know, are getting more enforcement, and just like for me personally, I've had the surveillance state like impact me a lot, like with my criminal cases, and I'm wondering if that's like a theme for a lot of other people that's gonna continue to present problems.
Do you want to answer? I want to answer. Two answers to that. One, if you can do graffiti in the public sphere, it means something more if you have an enhanced surveillance state. That comes from a friend that I have in London, which is the most, surveilled city in the entire world. And he's always like, if I can do graffiti in this city, it actually means something. But of course the answer is yes. That's one of the reasons why everybody's riding in the tunnels.
I mean, it all, like from when Chaz started, and from what I hear through the 80s, there were guys on the freeways doing like productions during the day. Times change, and that's what you see who the real writers are as they change. Like there's people that talk about the old days and how good it used to be, and then there's people that are doing stuff and finding a way around it. And I think there's a bunch of them now that are doing stuff that people didn't think you could do now. Like where there's a will, there's a way. And I think the street stuff and the tunnel stuff, it's two different things. It's two different goals. Like, will that spill over? Will the streets spill over into the tunnels? Like, Orange County tunnels are way more painted because people don't really paint the streets, not like we do out here. So, I think people are always going to find a way. They're just going to have to take bigger risks, like death and jail. I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you're really trying to do crazy street stuff, like, I mean, we've all seen specific people, like there's consequences to it. If you're up for the consequences, then maybe you're the person for that. If you're not, maybe you're more of a fine artist.
Don't do the crime if you can't serve the time, right? Yeah.
You're going to be the high profile person, accept what comes to you.
Any questions from the crowd? No. I just had a quick question. There's been 30, 40 years of street art and 100 years of civilian graffiti in the LA River and in the tunnels. I was just wondering what some historical favorite pieces of either art or graffiti might be from y'all? Speaking all of history, you're allowed to pick one.
My favorite piece of graffiti right this second is driving on the 210. This is not the answer you wanted. Driving on the 210, there are these hay trucks, because I grow a lot of hay in the Imperial Valley. It gets trucked out here. And mine is spray painted in purple on the back of the hay, and it says, gay and proud. That's, to me, that's like an awesome one. But yeah, there's these beautiful little pieces, little tiny pieces of writing, little things in pencil. I mean, I don't know. There's too much to choose from, but I will choose gay and proud for now.
Saber, his piece, gigantic piece down there at the river. They could be seen by space. They sent him a picture, you know, and so that to me was one of the few of incredible pieces. But Saber is that one for me.
I thought it was incredible too that Saber was able to redo that after it was dissed and finish the outlines and cover up all that tags that were over it. Evan?
I don't know. I'm not out on the freeways as much as I used to be, but I think there's cool stuff everywhere if you look. And yeah, sometimes it's from people you don't expect. Like actually I saw one, I guess maybe there's a theme here, over in like City of Industry. And like, yes, I'm always gonna appreciate a crazy spot with perfect highlights and 3Ds and like, you can't fake that. But it's near like where a homeless camp sets up in City of Industry sometimes, and I was there on foot. Because a lot of stuff you only see when you're driving. And I saw this, I think they had the Winnebago or whatever parked in front of it, and it was this detail that looked like pieces of bubble gum, like these rendered pink bubbles with drop shadows. And it was like maybe like 4 square feet of it, me and Chris saw it. And it was like, it's not political, it's not sending out any grand message, but just thinking that like somebody, maybe they were tweaking, maybe they just had to get these pink bubbles out of their head, sat in the drop shadow, the highlight on it, and you know, some of them were like that big and some of them were like that big. Like, for me, a big part of the tunnel is the civilian stuff. It's like, I don't know.
I would love to see a book of outsidery civilian graffiti found from all over the tunnels.
Well, there's a book called The Ulysses Guide to the Elder River. It's available in the gift shop, and there's a few volumes of operation, but a whole dedicated book, maybe it's a Susan Phillips book, or
absolutely. I don't know if we're wrapping up, but I wanted to say something in response to your last question, that one of the pieces of graffiti that I've loved in my life in LA was one that was in downtown, and it was clearly written by a writer, just given the name, but it wasn't like writing the way we think of it. It said, "The mind is the only prison that can bind the soul." And to me, that's just like what this show is. That's what you guys do. I mean, people talk about thinking outside the box, but this is some kind of radical enactment of that principle that I just want to say means a lot to me personally, to have been part of it in a tiny, tiny way. To be included in the show is incredible. I think this collective work is really beautiful, and it reminds me of that piece of graffiti.
Thank you.
One last thing. Growing up, there was an MAK, the crew MAK production, 110 going through Chinatown. It was fully all done in spray paint, full coverage. It was probably like one of these blocks or bigger. There was a Mickey Mouse holding NEO. I forget the details of it, but everything, it was rendered, full coverage, and it stayed there forever. Like, Caltrans just gave them the pass, and then some dude went and caught tags in it, and it was the end. And always in my head, it's like, that was like the end of that era, where you had these like late 80s guys that just said, I'm gonna go out and do it, pulled it off. Like, similar with Chaz's, it's bittersweet because it could have been avoided. But that's the one I always hold in my head. Like, seeing that on the freeway as a teenager, trying to wrap my mind around how it was done. Anyway.
Cool.
Wrap it up?
Yeah. Thank you so much to all of our panelists today. Such an eclectic group of artists and thinkers and experts, and Sean Roach, your presentation with the animals was incredible. Thank you for that. Thanks so much, Chaz, for being a part of this. It's a real honor to have you be here. Susan Phillips, thank you so much. I would really recommend you check out Susan's book, The City Beneath, A Century of Los Angeles Graffiti. I've learned some of my best LA random historical facts about graffiti and LA history from Susan's book. Thank you, Raul Diaz. Contrabando, definitely check their table out. Raul Diaz's table has some insane skeletons on it. Contrabando, always surprising. And thank you, Evan. Thanks for everything. You can check out Operation Under's book that we published for the show, as well as a few remaining copies of their old books. Much like the panel, Operation Under isn't comprised of one type of person.
These are the last of the Ulysses Guide.
These are the very last of the Ulysses Guide to the LA River. If you try to find that on Amazon, you're paying $200 plus for a used copy. You can get a good deal here today. And you know, the show is incredible. Respect to Operation Under. They've come up with a really original approach to something like doing artwork in tunnels, and brought together a lot of people from different groups and accomplished something really amazing with what they do in the tunnels and with this exhibition. It's probably the first and last time they're going to do an exhibition above ground. So thanks everybody for being a part of like this historical occasion, and I hope you enjoyed the panel today. Thanks for coming out.